board input. We did have a request from Kath Hanley from the Waiheke Local Board, but that has now been withdrawn. We now will jump to David Abbott and Dirk Hudig. Sorry if I've got that wrong, you might want to correct me. Stop Auckland Sewage Overflows Coalition. So you'll have 5 minutes to present. We have the presentation. I assume we're controlling that?
Yes, that's correct.
So I've got a frozen screen.
Yeah.
Just see if we can, are they unmuted?
We unmuted.
Oh, I can hear, is that you, Mr. Abbott?
Yeah, Chair, this is David Abbott speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and we've just... Oh, yep, the pitch is now working. So you've got about 5 minutes to present, and we will try and... we're just seeing if we can connect your slide to all members of the committee. And it doesn't want to come up.
Look, it's... if you can't get it up, that's fine. Yeah, don't worry.
All members have the presentation sent out to them. We can... I think all members have access to the slides on Nexus. Yes, we do. So if all members could follow along, you could possibly say, we're moving to the next slide, if that's easier for you, and we can follow on like that. Apologies. But you have 5 minutes from now, so haven't cut into any of your time.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mayor, councillors, I'm joined here by Dirk Hudig, as the Chair has said. We are the co-conveners of the SASOC Coalition of Community Organisations, and we're very appreciative of the time that you've given us today. Really, the essence of this public presentation today is to encourage you as councillors ahead of your work on the long-term planning to give additional prioritisation to water quality planning for Auckland. And just very briefly, some great work was done ahead of the 2018 long-term plan. And in our submission, it is vitally important that you do not step back from all of that work. And really what we're saying is that if that means a change to prioritisation of cuts, then that's where we really ask you to take that approach. A change to a pro rata application of cuts, because in our view, water drainage and infrastructure is vital. I've given you in the second slide a simple history of the need. I'm not going to go through that. That is the common aim, the first thing there, and that's we're all on that same page. The next slide is the history of the need, and I don't think I really need to go into any of the detail. You will all, I'm sure, be aware of your areas of difficulties with places like Cox's Creek, Meola Stream, the New Lynn flooding, Hobson Bay currently, Takapuna Beach, the Wairau Estuary. Those are just a snapshot of ones there. And I think it's also pretty clear and accepted that there's been a lack of really clear, consistent and long-term policy and planning over many years. And that's why infrastructure is in the state that it is in terms of needing of additional and significant investment. And I've given in the paper that I've sent out in support of the PowerPoint, a bit more detail there. I've given some of the history or the facts on the history of underinvestment. I think I want to go into the third slide, which is the 2018 watershed slide. And that's what I've already adverted to. The planning for the 2018 LTP made some very significant steps in catch-up. The Western Isthmus program was started. supported by committed funding in terms of the targeted rate. Council, that's the Healthy Waters Department, and Water Care work together to upgrade the combined system in the Western Isthmus, and largely the funding there has gone into separation, but it's not all. There's been an increased focus within both organisations on causes of mixing of stormwater and wastewater throughout the region, and those on the North Shore will be appreciative of the fact that you've got a separated system, but there are still difficulties, and things like infiltration and bad connections are critical in there. And I think the significant thing was the introduction of the targeted rate. Now, these were all in addition to what was felt to be a reasonable general budget for maintenance and upgrade right across Auckland. And most recently, planning has been starting on thinking how this may be extended into the Eastern Isthmus. Turning to the gist of things, and this is the next slide, the impact of budgetary restraints as a result of COVID, and I have to say we are very appreciative of the difficulties that Council has at this time. It's made some significant changes, and I've referred to those as two very important ones: lack of relining of existing pipes, and therefore leakage from pipes, replacing end-of-life infrastructure. And what has happened there is that there's been a change in the risk. So it's only as it gets closer to real collapse that it is now getting attention. Now, that is really, both of those changes, in our view, exemplify a return to a reactive expenditure. And that's very unpredictable in terms of both the adverse effects and the cost. We say that continuing budget constraints or a failure to provide for early catch-up will raise the prospect of increased financial pressure when an unpredicted failure occurs, and that must remain a real risk whilst funding for infrastructure replacement and maintenance remains below the level required. The problem worsens the longer budget restrictions continue. The greater delay in catching up on the current year's retrenchment and any scaling back in further budgets will just and often and that is very possible if you continue with or if Healthy Waters feels it has to continue with a higher risk profile in terms of its maintenance work, will just add to the problem. And what it is it puts Auckland at risk of a return to that past of underinvestment and the disastrous effects from it. So what do we say we think we need? And what we're encouraging you to really think of when you start work in detail on the long-term plan is an outcome-focused policy and a funded plan. And in our view, the policy needs to be established, which sets appropriate standards. And I'm not saying this is the standard, but obviously currently this one being used as swimmability. It sets a time frame for achieving that standard. It sets a budget to achieve the standard within a set time frame, and that's again critical. And the past has been that things have been put into budgets and then let slide, and I think it's critical that that keeps up. And again comes to the key point which I've been making, which is that it prioritises expenditure on drainage infrastructure, both within Council's general budget, and protects it by a targeted rate. Now, in our view, the plan must also be sustainable, and this has its own financial consequences. And to start with that, it means it has to be based on a very detailed schedule of the infrastructure asset, which sets out life expectancy, a program for upgrade, and an estimate of costs so that you, the councillors, can really make informed decisions. It must build infrastructure that meets your climate plan. And the accepted science appears to be that stormwater infrastructure will need to cope with increased volumes of rainfall. And finally, it's critical that it is also integrated with Water Care's wastewater strategy and plans. So thank you for that. I'm sorry it is necessarily rushed. I hope you can go back over the written material, which I've really just briefly run through and summarised there. And of course, you've got the PowerPoint to pick up on as well.
No, thank you very much, David. That was very clear, and I think generally we are very on board with all of your points, so thank you very much for that. We do have some questions. Deputy Chair, Councillor Coombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, David and Dirk. Thank you so much for presenting today and for all the work that you put into this, into ensuring that Auckland has got good water quality. We can absolutely support you in your vision. I just wondered, in terms of with your hats on as chairs of residents' associations, what's your feeling in terms of community support, and especially in the context of, there was quite a lot of concern early on that residents wouldn't tolerate the disruption from separation, but it would be good just to kind of get your view on the feeling on the ground, so to speak.
Perhaps I can answer that question. At our last AGM, when we unveiled to the 120 odd members that were present, there was a standing ovation when they were notified there would be separation, and everybody accepted that would cause some difficulty with roads being dug up and so on. But they are very appreciative of the fact that their beaches will be usable.
I'll add to that, Pippa, that is exactly the position within the St Mary's Bay membership and the wider resident group, those who are not part of it. And we've seen that largely there'll always be a few who are uncertain about allowing access to properties, to doing things, but they, the minute they really told the information, given the information and told that what will be achieved by it, just about everybody falls into line and says, yes, well, we're in support of that too. So it's not just our specific membership, it is an area-wide support. And they know that is bringing with it, it will bring with it disruption, and see that as an acceptable cost.
Thank you. Thank you for your advocacy on behalf of the community. Appreciated.
You're welcome.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Coombe. Mayor Goff, question.
Yeah, thank you very much, David and Dirk, for your presentation today, but more particularly for your long-term advocacy for improving our water quality, and that's a commitment obviously we share, and that's why it was given such priority in the 2018 long-term plan. As you're aware, 1.1 billion into the Central Interceptor. We've had a targeted rate of 411 million going in, and in particular to the Western Isthmus. In your own area, I think separation and the tunnel in St Mary's and Macefield is about 78 million. So my question is this: we have a situation of limited resources and unlimited demand. Western Isthmus, huge demand. Eastern Isthmus, you mention. You don't mention the Manukau, but that equally is a body of water, as is the Kaipara, that has been damaged over time. So the real question that we have to face in the budget is, where do you get the money from to do all of the things that you badly want to do? So my question is this: what are your suggestions for how we might raise the money to do that? Do you think there's an appetite, for example, in your area, for local targeted rates to bring forward the work that could be done?
My response to that, Mayor, would be that this is an Auckland-wide issue and has to be treated in that way. Now, yes, it seems as if St Mary's and Herne Bay are first cabs off the rank in terms of the targeted rate, but they in time will be needing to support the other areas as development goes on and the improvements are effected there. I appreciate that these things have to be spread over time. You can't do everything at once. But I think that and that's why I come back to the submission we make, which is saying it has to be by way of some degree of prioritisation and putting water infrastructure right to the top. It's something that's happening worldwide now. The impact of water in its many forms is being seen to be more significant to humankind. I commend both the government and the council for their approach to, or their wish to improve the Three Waters analysis and finding programs, but just bringing it back down to this present issue, which is how do we improve our drainage infrastructure. I'm saying we've got to be generous. We've got to make sure we cover the Auckland region, and so I accept that point entirely. And that I just don't think it is a case of saying, well, you'll pay for it out of your specific areas as you go. If you do that, I think you'll end up with all sorts of infighting within groups. I think generally we've got to say it is an Auckland City issue and will be dealt with fairly across the whole of Auckland City.
Can I just add to that? It's Dirk speaking. Mayor Goff, one of the things that we've preached for some time is that we'd like to have a ballpark figure on the cost of these things. We don't know how much it's going to cost, nor do you. And until we actually know what the cost is and what the benefits are, or the potential benefits are, I think we're really walking in a fog. And the fog needs to be lifted so that the facts are on the table.
And if I can just add to that, the other critical part of the information need is to have a really good understanding of the existing infrastructure, because until you get that and it's a region-wide analysis, then it's very difficult to work on you can't get to that cost factor, and therefore you can't work on where you prioritise.
Just a brief supplementary. I take your point that maybe targeting it to areas when the need is right across the whole region might not be the best way of doing it, but what I never hear from people is advocating or explaining how we might raise the money for it. And what I'm really looking for from you is your suggestions about how we might pay for this, because prioritisation doesn't take us very far, because we maybe, do we cut libraries to make better water quality? Do we cut sporting facilities and cultural activities? Basically, it's a shortage of funding, and I never hear a demand actually from any lobby group to say, okay, maybe we've all, as Aucklanders, have got to pay more for these things, and please put our rates up more. Is that the sort of thing that you would advocate?
Look, I wouldn't say which way I'd go on funding until I knew what the figures were, as I no doubt is your position. But I think, and that's why we say it's really important to identify the size of the problem. There's good work being done in that area. It needs to be sped up, and the figures need to be achieved or to be reached. And then if there is a real wish to improve our water quality, then I think it does have to be taken back to the population at large and say, what do you want? Do you want this improved water quality? And if you do, then we have to find ways of funding it. But are you really, is the current budget sufficient to meet that increase or not? We won't know until you know the figures. Equally, you have to look at where the other spends are. And if we're saying, well, perhaps there are other ways of dealing with transport instead of the massive amounts of money that go into roading. Roading, of course, creates all sorts of issues for water as well, with runoff into stormwater drains. And so these things, there's no very quick fix available for it. But my view is that you've really got to say, there may be space within your budget, or without having to sort of hike the budget, the total budget up enormously, but it does require prioritisation within that general budget.
Thank you, and I think it's a good conversation, maybe a wider one. We continue because you've both hit on the button of the issues we face. There's a lot more funding, but there needs to be more, and it needs to be. We are constantly reprioritising as well, but I definitely take those points. We do have one last question from Councillor Walker before we move on.
All right, I've just got a question that might assist in driving the response for people to pay, and that is, do you think that council should be identifying all the specific locations around the region where there are sewage overflows, for example, through the stormwater network, because at present we don't do that. I would suggest, and it goes to this, that it's also a health and safety issue, and might that awareness drive a willingness for people to pay if they actually knew where it was occurring on a regular basis?
My view is yes to that, and that is because we are in touch with a number of groups, not necessarily members of the SASOC coalition, but a wider groups outside of that in different parts of Auckland. And I've got to say that there's some magnificent work being done within the communities to raise interest and to get support within their communities. And this is not just a central Auckland issue, it is an Auckland-wide issue. And I think the sooner people understand that, and if I may say that I think that some of the Manukau people have been voices crying in the dark on that one for a long time. So the more information that's available, and I think the Safe Swim program goes some way towards that in terms of letting public see where there are difficulties on beaches. But the more information you get out there has got to be a help in terms of, for you as councillors, in getting support for the money that's needed to solve the problem.
Thank you very much. And just a supplementary question, Mr. Chair. Given that Auckland Council, through Watercare and Healthy Waters, knows where these discharge points are, and these occur on a regular basis, why can't we identify where they are specifically so that the residents and the general public are aware of what the hazard is? Thank you.
Well, all that comes back to the assessment of the cost of actually fixing all these problems. You can't get an assessment of the fix unless you know what the problem is, which means that you have to go and find out what the problems are at these various overflows that are polluting the beaches and the harbours. Now, under the stormwater discharge consent, which was approved last year by the commissioners and later by the Environment Court, there is a requirement on the council to identify these points of pollution and to have a plan to actually fix them. So it all dovetails in with that particular consent. Now, that consent requires regular reports to the public and to various community organisations on the progress being made in that regard. So I think that's an excellent place to start looking at that consent and working on the whys and the wherefores and the costs and the abilities to fix it.
Yes, thank you. I think also just to balance it up a little bit for Councillor Walker, Safe Swim and Safe Networks have been two sort of groundbreaking projects the last 2.5 years that we've been working on. Safe Swim obviously identified significant information throughout our outfalls and through our infrastructure and things that the Safe Networks, I can speak for my own ward, where Takapuna Beach and the Waido Estuary, there's been significant mapping and addressing, many issues, big and small, and significant investment that has come after those. So it is not a overnight process, but it definitely is happening. I'll just get Barry to maybe have the final comment on the process. But thank you both very much, and we are definitely putting water quality high, very high, on our priorities for the 10-year budget. I know all of us did that last time, but there's definitely room to increase that, and was part of our prioritisation for the emergency budget when we lost that sort of $500 million. That water quality was way up there as a priority, but we can definitely do more. Barry, do you just want to cover off those last points around what we are doing?
Thank you, Chair. Malo Malole for Tongan Language Week. Just very briefly, our Healthy Waters department has a very good handle on overflow points and where those occur. The Safe Swim program and other programs have been instrumental in helping them understand that. They also have a very good handle on streams and the programs that need to be done to enhance stream conditions as well. They have a good picture of total costs involved to address these situations, and as the Mayor has mentioned, the costs are significant. So just to make that point, we do have very good data.
Right, thank you both again very much for being here with us, and thank you for dealing with our technical issues. But we'll just have a mover. Councillor Coombe, did you want to move? And a seconder, maybe Councillor Walker, would you like to second? Motion of thanks.
Happy to second.
We received your public input, and thank you both for your attendance. So thank you very much. All those in favour?
Aye.
And anyone opposed? Thank you very much, and have a good day and the rest of your week.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome to mute your screen and stay on. Otherwise, you can leave. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cool. Thank you. Now we will move to Janet Cole and Mark Allen. From you're speaking, Janet, on behalf of the Kaipātiki project. I can see that you're online, but if you want to unmute, and we've got your presentation on screen for members of the committee. We can't, if you are speaking, Janet, we cannot hear you yet, so we'll just check from our end.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you now. Cool.
Awesome.
And we can see you
Kia ora koutou. Ngā mihi kia koutou. So I'm Janet Cole, representing Kaipātiki Project, and I'm here today with Mark Allen from Community Waitakere, and we're here bringing the voice of community environment organisations. We work collaboratively and cooperatively through forums such as the Northwest Wildlink, with others such as Eco Matters Environment Trust, Forest and Bird, and QE2, and we're here today to bring our collective voice as you start the long-term plan process. We want to focus on the opportunity to innovate, how we can move forward together with all our voices and moving from degraded to thriving environments, Mauri titaha to Mauri ora. Next slide, please. So, Kaipātiki Project, some of you will be familiar with us. We inspire and empower people to revive nature and live lightly on our planet across Auckland's north. The heart of our organisation is at the Kaipātiki Project Hub. We work with everyone in our community, and in all our work we treasure mātauranga Māori and practice concepts of good stewardship. We work in a number of areas. I've listed some there across environmental programs. And hand over to Mark.
Morena everyone, ko Mark Allen ahau no Community Waitakere Executive Officer. Greetings, it's lovely to talk to you this morning. If we could just move on to the next slide, thank you. Community Waitakere, alongside a number of other environmental community organisations that we are all kind of bring the voice to the table, have been working in this area for a while. We are, all of us, passionate about resilient and sustainable Auckland, and we each work in different areas. We have, as you can see here, we work deeply with community, and I just want to identify the difference between community and residents and businesses. In community, we're talking about collectivism. We're talking about people coming together and working together. What our organisations offer, the Auckland Council, is the opportunity to connect to groups of people rather than having to do individual connection. And we already have fabulous relationships with a number of parts of Auckland Council. What we're here to do is to kind of support a step up, a change. We believe that, through some of these examples here, we're working in food security, we're working in water quality, we're working in household water storage, waste reduction and diversion, particularly with vulnerable communities. We're working in pest and weed work, we're working in climate change, resiliency, but we're also working in shifting to low carbon communities. As you can see, Community Waitakere has been there for 35 years. We're doing a wide variety of stuff in the community. I'm very keen to support this LTP process. Over to you, Janet.
Kia ora. Next slide, please. So the challenge as we see it is that business as usual is inadequate. We need to be creating a future that's good for people and the planet. We need urgent transformation. We need a real step change and to bring everyone along on the journey, empowering a just transition and ensuring all of your resources and all of our collective resources are best applied to achieve this. We recognise that Council is already addressing some of these through developing frameworks and strategies. How will these be embedded into the long-term plan? How can we scale them up? And how can we partner to deliver those and make sure they get delivered and step up our environments? Next slide, please. So the critical step as we see it is partnering. So partnership with community organisations to develop the long-term plan environment components, ensure residents and their community organisations' voices are heard and incorporated, and embed community into leading delivery wherever possible. We see that through that there'll be multiple benefits. We'll deliver long-term social and local economic outcomes. The community is capable of agile innovation to address roadblocks. We can, let's together look at what if there was local energy generation in every community? What if there was a community compost hub and teaching garden everywhere? Referring to the previous presentation, what if every community had a door-to-door campaign to clean up our streams and prevent there being the fat blocks and the pipes that create these leakages into the streams? Let's realise the multiplier effects of designing local solutions, local implementation, and the multiplier effect for the local dollar go round. Mark, do you want to add anything else?
No, I think you've covered. I mean, the core issue, the core opportunity here is, as Mayor Goff mentioned before, there's just not enough money to go around, and we need to have a really strongly well-informed communities to be able to engage in what role council plays, but also what role community organisation can play. And I think what we're here for is we think there is an opportunity coming in nice and early now to start the conversation and bringing that empowered communities approach alongside council's food strategies, climate change strategies, water strategies, wastewater strategies, and to be able to move forward together to actually create a step change in community infrastructure.
And I guess I finally say that we believe that often it's a false dichotomy to say, will we spend on preventing infiltration into the streams or will we spend on local economic development? Actually, the smart thing to do is design a process that can deliver both together. Last slide, please. So thank you for your time. Aio ki runga, aio ki raro, aio ki ngā mea katoa, tihei mauri ora.
Kia ora, right on time. Thank you, Janet and Mark. That was awesome. And, you know, working with you both over the years, I know that your passion for this and the fact you are inventing and creating different things that partner with community business and council and government organisations all the time. So if there are ways that we can do things better for the community outcomes, but also to get that dollar going further as well, because you always seem to make that happen. So just see if there are any questions. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to move this presentation as well. Thanks, Jenna and Mark. I just wondered, on your last comment around creating community enterprise that also fixes the problem, helps to be part of the problem solving. Have you got any examples? You could just give us a quick example that creates jobs for people but also helps us confront and sort out some of our problems.
I would give one example, which is the community composting hubs. So we know that we've got intensification in our suburban areas and our communities. People don't actually have space to do their own composting or gardens, and they might not know how. They can have a bokashi bin under the bench. They can walk or cycle or drive down the road with their bokashi bucket, pop it into the local community garden composting hub, pick up a fresh bucket and later come back and maybe get a bag of soil if they want for their grandmother or whatever, or come and help with the local garden and take the produce home. So you contribute something and you get to take something home, and we're reducing the waste problem that we have to deal with, creating circular economy and employing local through the process.
Thank you.
If I may give 2 examples, one would be around a community nursery. We're looking at one out there in West Auckland, and we're looking that it will actually work with vulnerable communities and disabled communities as an employer and a stepping stone to wider employment. We're working closely with Forest and Bird, trying to look at some building on the shovel ready, so through the community sector being able to access central government funding. I personally think, having been working in the New Lynn area and listening to that stormwater message that was earlier there, I think there are sub-opportunities within some of the major contracts that exist already. For example, monitoring streams and walking the edges and alerting where there are blockages. For example, mattresses floating down the streams, etc. So I think there are a wide variety of options, but because of the way that we approach the contracting models, sometimes we don't see those opportunities. And one of the things that the LTP offers is the opportunity to unpick some of that stuff and say, hey, how can we do this differently? And how can we have the community sector working alongside the business sector and the council?
Good, Mark and Janet.
Perfect, agree with that. Councillor Watson, got the last question there.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Janet and Mark. That's an excellent presentation and very, very timely. I've seen, the wonderful work that the Kaipatiki project does, in both the North Shore ward and the Albany ward, which is, quite a big chunk of the region. My question to you, Janet, is have there been any, exploratory discussions with people in the relevant departments of council as to how this might work? I mean, I think of the culmination of a lot more needing to be done, and conceivably tight resources. Have you had any discussions as to how that might roll out in practical terms? Because for me, it seems like a really exciting prospect.
Yes, thank you. The conversations that happen tend to be focus a little bit ad hoc, so tend to be focused on the opportunities as they come up. What we're proposing today is something a little more strategic, looking ahead, setting up the structures. Community finds it very challenging, you possibly do as well, to understand how all the parts of council come together to make a solution. So maybe going back to that water quality conversation earlier, those gentlemen were talking about a number of different parts of council that need to come together to make that solution. We find the same thing. So yes, we have those conversations. For example, in the waste solutions area, there are community recycling centres and working at different scales. We're working on Zero Waste Northcote plan. It's challenging and it's exciting. We're working with Aotearoa on their construction demolition waste, working with Panuku on their plans to deconstruct the town centre and build offices and apartments and more retail. We're working with residents, both of Aotearoa and other residents and owners, about residential waste to bring it all together. Also the waste contractors, also Ventia and the public places, Auckland Transport, bringing that whole conversation together. Very challenging, also very exciting if we can crack it. How much more momentum would we have if the long-term plan set us up with a great foundation and structure to have those conversations from the get-go?
Okay, thanks, Janet. And I assume, Mr. Chair, that we'll pick this presentation up and maybe have some feedback as to how this notion could be explored a little further.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Thankfully, Janet and I had quite a long but good conversation during level 3 sometime on the phone, and and Janet has sent me a list of bullet points of how we can explore these sorts of things, and Connor from the CSA team is following those up at the moment, so hopefully we can get that back to all of us, and potentially if there's something connecting the procurement space and everything else together would be working with Greg Sayers and the chair of that committee and others on some sort of plan for the long-term plan that we could work on which is benefiting the environment and our budget and the community, I think we'd all support that. So thanks, Councillor Watson. And we have a mover and a seconder to thank both of you and acknowledging both Kaipātiki Project and Community Waitakere. And yeah, we thank you both for presenting today and love your energy and passion for this area, but also the fact you're always keeping us on our toes and being so positive as well. So thank you. And I'll move that. All those in favour?
Aye.
And
Aye.
Against? No one's against that, of course. Thank you very much. And I was wrong before. If you do want to continue watching, it's probably best to go to Auckland Council live stream so you can watch it more collectively as opposed to being part of the meeting structure itself. But yeah, thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, for all your work too, Richard, and everyone.
Kia ora.
Awesome. And just want to acknowledge Councillor Young and Councillor Stewart are on the call, and Councillor Philippina is on the phone, and he'll be coming in live, in real life in a minute. Cool. So next up, no extraordinary items. And we have now item 8. We've got